So Hazbin Hotel has just released this month, or last month, depending on when I finally finish this video. I'm honestly just so excited for this renaissance period of adult animation that we're having at the moment. Between Digital Circus, Lackadaisy, Hell of a Boss, Hazbin Hotel, Vox Machina, Arcane. There are just some fantastic stories out there. Anyway, I could ramble about this for hours, but I'm gonna get to the point. Hi, I'm Miss Twisted. I do cosplay and makeup and other weird and wonderful things. And I made an Angeldust cosplay. I love Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss's aesthetic just generally. I think if it existed when I was a teenager, my little emo heart would have just exploded. But I chose Angeldust to cosplay, partly because he's got 4 arms, and I think that's cool. I also really like his pink and white aesthetic, and I think his character is really interesting. Now, if I had a nickel for every time I did a cosplay that involved 4 arms, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
I actually cosplayed Sardonyx from Steven Universe years ago. And to be honest, in hindsight, I think that was one of the first times I fell in love with puppetry and movement in cosplay, which, as I'm sure you can tell, is something I still use a lot to this day and I'm very passionate about. Now, this is actually the second time I'm filming this intro. The first time was back before I started the Angeldust cosplay, back in those innocent days where I totally expected this project to take like 4 days max and have absolutely nothing go wrong and everything go perfectly. Just like all the cosplays that I do always go perfectly to plan with no slip-ups, no complications. To summarize, this cosplay project had a lot of things that didn't go 100% according to plan. Most of that was my fault for not thinking things through or just not researching them or barreling on ahead without knowing what the heck I'm doing. So please join me on this weird project as a cautionary tale of optimism / hubris as I make some questionable decisions and eventually kind of sort of triumph into a mostly functioning cosplay. I'm gonna hand it back to past me to take it from here. Now, I'm not gonna build this whole cosplay up from scratch. I think I'm just gonna buy a blazer and paint it. I'm gonna make a bow tie, style the wig, but the main aspect I'm focusing on to make from scratch will be the arms. And I have some really cool little techniques I wanna try out for this one. Okay, so here's kind of where I'm at with everything. So I bought a white blazer online. It has like a nice collar. It's a little bit wrinkly because I had it shoved in a drawer for ages. I'm just gonna use fabric paint on this and paint in some stripes. I could sculpt my own hands and I'm not very good at sculpting, so I'm not gonna do that. I have seen Sarah Spaceman do a really cool sculpted hands out of foam clay in her Ranni tutorial, so I'll put that in a link down below. But I really wanted my hands to be poseable, so like have wires or something in them so I can pose them in different ways. So what I've done in the past is I've used those poseable hands that you can buy for like manicure practices, but they don't look super realistic, I guess. Future Charlotte again, you can actually get some really realistic silicone ones, and I was aware of that at the time. I just avoided them because they were super expensive, but honestly, with the price I paid for the latex and the silicone and all of the hours spent working on it, I should have just bought the hands. It's the classic cosplay mindset of why would you buy it for $50 when you can make it for $100 worth of craft supplies? So the next option is, well, I can make a mold of my own hand and then kind of use that. Just trust a cosplayer to find the most complicated roundabout way of doing things just for the sake of it looking slightly more realistic. So my thoughts with the hand was to make a silicone mold of the hand and then do like a slush cast, which I'll explain later, and then fill it with like foam and wire, so then you have like a poseable hand that's not too heavy and a little bit stretchy, so it kind of feels and acts like a real hand. Okay, so here was my first draft, which is terrifying and I love it. Like, look at this monstrosity. So this is essentially, I've covered my own hand with the silicone to create the silicone mold, which worked fine. Absolutely great. It was like a glove. I slipped it off, had a perfect mold of my hand. I tried to cast it by pouring in a different kind of silicone with tons of mold release in the mold. So you can kind of see like the actual silicone of the mold and the silicone of the cast just fused together, and I just could not get it out without it all coming out together. So that's my little zombie hand. So what I'm going to try is another silicone mold of my hand. That worked fine. Tons of mold release, and then slush cast it with latex, liquid latex. I'm then going to take it out in the mold, and then I've got like basically a glove of a perfect replica of my hand, and then I can stuff that with the wire and foam to fill that out and make it bendable, and then hopefully that'll work. This is the exact moment you can see the doubt on my face for this plan, but I had to wait for the silicone to arrive, so I started on the jacket. Here is my base blazer. I'm going to mark out where I want the stripes to go and then start going. I'm gonna do some dots using a pink marker. There it is. And I know it's a bit risky because like I'm marking the fabric, it's probably not going to come off, but because I'm going to be painting so much of it pink anyway and doing the satin stitch, I think I'm going to be able to cover up those markings pretty well. Before I get carried away with the painting, I am just like unstitching these little pocket squares on the front of that blazer, which is kind of a shame because I never have enough pockets when it comes to cosplays. I just need to make sure I remember to sew some into the skirt instead, I think. Spoiler alert, I did not remember this. So for paint, I have these fabric paints, which came in like a big box of different colors, and they're supposed to be fabric spray paints, but like they're hot garbage as spray paints. What I have found is they're really nice for a really smooth, relatively thin fabric paint. Like it kind of soaks into the fabric a little bit rather than like just sitting on top. So I think it's gonna be perfect for this. I've just kind of mixed like a reddy, berry red color and a pink together, and this is the color I've got, which I think is like, looking at the art, is about as close I'm going to get. And yeah, it looks like it's working all right, so it's going to go for it. I don't know if you guys can see in the camera, I've already spilt some pink on there, so luckily it's right on the side. I think it's going to be too noticeable. Okay, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I've put it on a mannequin, which I have like covered in this cling wrap so that I'm not going to get my mannequin pink. I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier. This is going to make painting way easier. Okay, so I did a really bad job with the painting. Don't get me wrong, like the pink is nice. I really like how I did the white, like the lighter pink in the middle of the stripes to kind of give it a bit of dimension. But there are so many little splotches of pink on the white sections. Oh, I think it's still stuck. I've got it still stuck to the plastic. But there's loads of splotches on the white sections because I just got kind of like a little bit too impatient and like trigger happy, I guess, with the paintbrush. I didn't cover it up or anything like that. So that's entirely on me. What I'm going to do about that is I'm not going to paint white stripes. What I do have is some cotton sateen. Slap those bad boys on there and then stitch like up and like the top and bottom of the stripe with the satin stitch that I was talking about to finish off the edges. And then hopefully we've got like a mostly finished jacket. Okay, here's my very professional floor area. I've got my cutting mat down and I've got a bunch of like cling wrap over this one because I'm about to spray it with a bunch of glue. So these are my little strips of cotton sateen. I've just kind of cut out the rectangle. This is roughly the width of those white sections of stripes on the jacket. And all I'm going to do here is get this stuff here, which is a quilt basting spray, which I quite like to use. I'm going to be very lenient, just a tiny bit up and down. So now I've got my stripe section here. I'm going to take this piece and just kind of smack it down right over there. Okay, stripe is in place. We're going to satin stitch this now.
A satin stitch is basically a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine with like as low a length as you can get away with on your sewing machine, and then whatever width you want. And what this does is basically create like a line of solid thread, kind of like embroidery. Alright, these didn't turn out half bad in the end. You can do this like in gentle curves, but it's much easier to do it neatly on a straight line. Now I've just got to glue down every other stripe and then satin stitch every other line.
Okay, so my stripes are looking much cleaner, which I love.
So the collar pieces I'm literally just going to cut out of black poplin. This is basically like the cheapest plain cotton fabric that you can buy. I'm kind of okay with using a plain one because I'm going to bedazzle it later with a bunch of gemstones. Also, if you're noticing a bunch of weird angles throughout this video, I broke the main stand that I use, so I'm kind of waiting on a tripod at the moment. So a lot of this is my phone or my camera being like precariously balanced on top of a bunch of boxes to film. Anyway, I've basically cut out 4 identical pieces that are roughly the shape of this top area of the collar. I went a little bit wider because I do want the black parts of this jacket to be a bit more pronounced. Now I'm actually going to use some iron-on interfacing that I'm going to use on all 4 pieces. Usually you'd only use it on like one of them and then bagline with the other like without the interfacing. I'm using on all of them. I just want these collar pieces to be super stiff and thick. That's what she said. Cutting out the collar pieces and placing them right sides together, we're going to sew a straight stitch right along the outer edges of this piece. right around this tight corner, cutting as close as you can to the stitching without cutting the stitching is going to help that corner look nice and crisp when we turn it inside out. I did press this under my iron before I'm putting in the top stitch here. It'll help the whole thing just look really flat and crisp. With two lovely crisp collar pieces ready to go, I made the third piece, which will wrap around the back of the neck and form that little point that you see on the jacket. All I did to get this shape was again just loosely trace it from our existing jacket, and I'm just going to top stitch along this line to join the two together. And I'm just kind of using like a basic zigzag stitch for something nice and reinforced to attach that collar onto our jacket. Because these pieces will already be folded back, I'm not too worried about how the stitching is going to look on the other side because it's all going to be covered up. Quick test fit just to make sure I'm happy with how everything is sitting, and I'm ready to move on.
Okay, quick check in. This is looking freaking amazing. I'm so happy with how the jackets come together.
Oh hey, it's voiceover Charlotte from the future here. I didn't realize that my microphone had run out of battery. I'm still getting used to a new camera and new microphone system. Basically, this whole section is me explaining how much stretch velvet sucks, and yet I'm going to use it to basically just sew together a skirt, and I might use it for the bow tie as well. So speaking of the bow tie, I have this lovely rectangle of the stretch velvet and a rectangle of the iron-on interfacing as well. I'm going to fold this in half, right sides together, and literally just sew along the outside edge just to kind of create like a tube of fabric. All right, one edge is stitched up. I'm going to move that to the middle and then stitch up one of the sides and kind of like 3/4 of the other, just leaving a little bit of a hole so I can turn this whole thing inside out. With my lovely little velvet rectangle, all I have to do is squeeze it in the center to get this lovely bow tie shape. I did end up going back to make the bow tie a little bit smaller, and I wrapped the thread around the center to create that bow tie shape. Okay, round one, we've got the Wobbler's crystal art, which I really quite like, and this was not a bad idea. Oh, there goes a bunch of the beads, of course. Basically, you can heat these ones up. You can put them in like hot water, or you can just kind of blast them with a heat gun for a bit, and this is going to make them all soft and kind of sticky. It's going to kind of coagulate together like hot glue, and this stuff needs a lot more heat, so I don't recommend using your hands. I actually ended up using this little wooden spatula thing to try and move it, and again, I'm so sorry about the camera shaking, guys. Anyway, with this nice and gooey, I'm just putting on a tiny weeny bit of mica powder. I put on way too much and had to scrape half of it off. I just kind of awkwardly mashed at this thing to try and like spread the mica powder throughout to create that sort of metallic pink. My next misguided decision of this whole project was to try and use this really old paint palette as a mold. And for starters, this is hard plastic. It's not going to bend like a silicone mold will. And I was too impatient and was taking it out while this was still a bit soft. So of course it went about as well as you'd expect. I salvaged what I could of the gemstone and reheated the whole thing so I could sort of roll it back into a ball. And then rather than trying to use a mold, I just tried to smush it with my palm into the table to kind of create like a flat semicircle. I chucked some UV resin over the top of it for like a gloss coat, and that brings us to the end of round one.
The bow is looking pretty nice. Very fancy. This is my little dot for the middle of the bow. This is the wobbler with the resin over it, but it's not perfectly round, and that's really bothering me. I have this little strip from like a $2 shop years ago. If I run a permanent marker over them, you can see that that's a really nice sort of hot pink color. So I'm thinking of like just running those around the edge of this, which will give it more like glitteriness and also just make it look a little bit more perfectly round.
So still trying to salvage this one, I cut out a ring of wobbler that I was going to put around the gem to kind of hide the fact that it was like uneven, and then I was going to glue the gemstones onto this. But I ended up just covering everything in super glue, including the surface of the gemstone, which left like a milky white residue. Not to mention nothing seemed to stick with this one. And since I'd already gotten a bunch of the glue on the gemstone, I kind of just wrote this one off and said, okay, let's start again. Round two, which meant heating up the wobbler crystals again, more awkward kneading with this little spatula, more rolling it into a ball so it looks like forbidden candy. But this time, instead of just smushing it normally, I found a giant button that I'm smushing it into the center of, so that this button is going to act like the rim around where I can mount the gemstones. Except I realized I should have just painted this first. Now I'm kind of stuck using a permanent marker to try and color it in pink because I can't get that little section out of the center now. It's pretty much fused to the plastic. Anyway, this round, at least I have a nice surface that I can apply the gems to. I'm still using the super glue, but this time I'm just trying to be like extra careful not to get any on the surface of the gem. Well, it's not looking too bad. It kind of looks a little bit awkward though, and apparently having learned absolutely nothing from the failed first round, I'm applying some more of the UV resin. I have no idea why I was so fixated on this stuff. This one definitely didn't need it, but here we are.
Okay, so first off, sorry about the wet hair. I just showered. I cannot be bothered waiting for it to dry to film again, so that's what you get. I didn't like how it turned out. It looks gooey. I think I'm just going too heavy with the resin. I think it would have been fine without the resin, honestly, but too late for that. Anyway, we're on to round 3. I've got one button, similar size to the last one. I have a little cabochon eye thing that kind of fits perfectly in there. Don't worry about the eye. I'm going to spray paint this whole thing pink. Then I'm going to line the outside with those same little gemstones that I made because I do quite like those. Not going to touch any resin. The most I'm going to do then is like a clear top coat just to protect the paint, and then that's going to get stuck on the bow. I'm investing way too much time and energy into literally just the center part of a bow.
So I've spray painted my little button silver, and I'm going to go over it with this sort of metallic hot pink.
This is already round 3, and that is purple. Oh my god. Okay, I spray this back into like a sort of baby pink, and I've got my mica powder over it once more. I've never done anything so carefully in my life. I'm just going to try and gently brush this over the coating of spray paint that I've just given it. I'm not going to touch this any further. I'm just going to sit that there until I hope the spray paint is dried.
Immediately goes to touch it, of course.
Okay, so I've got a nice soft brush. I'm just going to try and do this.
Even after all this, there was still this weird little textured patch in the middle.
Okay, my bow tie is done. The middle piece looks good. It is shiny. It's got some sparkle. I'm not going to touch that any further.
And then immediately changed my mind and did round 4, which was literally just like a giant rhinestone, which I then just like covered with this sort of lycra in this beautiful shiny hot pink. I like it. It looked neat. I decided to not touch this with any gemstones, no resin, no mica powder, and no spray paint. This is done. I'm not doing a round 5, I promise.
So aside from overcorrecting on painting the jacket, somehow the tiny little center of the bow tie required 4 different versions before I was happy. 4 for the tiny little pink dot in the center of Angeldust's bow tie. I have my lovely little furry chest piece here. This is literally just like a triangle of white faux fur. I'm probably going to put in like some Velcro or something like that on either side of these collar pieces to kind of hold it in place. Also, I hate working with white faux fur because like most of my clothes are black, so this is going to get real messy. I had some leftover of that stretch velvet, which, as I mentioned, horrible to sew with, which is why I'm not doing any hems for it. All I've done is like it's one giant rectangle of fabric, and I've just folded the rectangle together and sewn it down one line. So it's like a pencil skirt, but it's literally just like a tube of fabric. That is all there is to it because you're barely going to see the skirt. It's just kind of like covering the butt. Actually, my next step before I do that is getting a lint roller and just going to town on all my clothes that I have now ruined from like 5 minutes of cutting fur.
So the Velcro is pretty simple. All I really did was sew a little Velcro strip just on the inside of these collar pieces, and then the matching pieces for that one down each side of my little fur triangle. I had to keep pushing the fur out of the way so I wouldn't constantly get the fibers caught in my sewing machine. Okay, time for some bedazzling. So I've got some fake nails glued onto the top of my gloves, and I'm actually wearing some latex gloves underneath this one to protect my skin and nails from any glue that I'm using on these gloves. And with my trusty fabric glue, I'm just going to do a couple of strips where I just sort of place the crystals along each of the fingers, and then just a bunch of them coming down the glove as well. With the pink gloves down, it was time to do exactly the same thing again with the white ones. And finally, a ton of little black crystals all over the collar. You might have noticed this weird little pencil device that I'm using. This is a wax pencil. It's pretty common for using with Swarovskis or other small crystals. It makes handling these tiny little gemstones so much easier.
Alright team, it's been a few days. I've just gotten my hair recolored, so I'm feeling nice and fresh. I have gotten 4 bedazzled gloves ready to go for Angeldust. I have a lovely bedazzled collar over here as well, and I got my Velcro all done. So basically, it's pretty simple. I've got Velcro down the side of the fur, Velcro on the inside of the collar here, and that basically means that this can come on and off, and that's going to be extremely useful in Australian conventions because they are always hot and stuffy. So being able to remove this fur really quickly when it gets too hot is going to be incredibly useful. I also got in the mail this stuff, which is fast-setting skin-safe silicone. That basically means that I can do the mold of my hand, which is the really fun bit I've been looking forward to. So we're just going to cover my hand in pink goop and make myself a nice little glove of silicone.
This is a 2-part silicone, so you need equal amounts of the hot pink stuff and the white stuff, which are very appropriate colors for Angeldust. I'm using a container that's sitting on a set of kitchen scales to make sure I'm getting exactly the right amounts. And just to reiterate, not all silicones are skin safe. Always read the instructions. Once this was mixed together into sort of a baby pink, I just basically started scooping it onto my hand. Yeah, this silicone doesn't even need mold release, so it's actually so so nice to work with. As long as you don't mind one of your body parts just being covered in gloop for about half an hour. This stuff sets pretty fast. I also went very thick with my layers because that way it would hold its shape even when I take it off my hand. Yeah, once again the sound was not working for this section because again I'm still adjusting to this new camera and mic setup, but I'm sure I'm telling you something very profound and informative and incredibly intelligent and very funny as well.
Alright, it's been about 25 minutes-ish. I can fully move my hand inside here. That is fully solid. I'm just going to slowly start wiggling my hand. Silicone is surprisingly stretchy, so once I can kind of wiggle a little bit, I should, in theory, be able to like just pull this off. So let's see how we go. All right, that feels like it's not sticking to me. I got it. That came out so perfectly. Yes. Oh, it's so creepy. Damn it. I just remembered that I was going to take a photo with this on my hand for the thumbnail. I wonder if I can put it back on like a glove. Yep. Success! Now I have a confession to make. I actually did a practice run already with my left hand. So I've already made the mold for that one and I've cut it open as well. So essentially I've got these two halves. Now, my initial thoughts were I was going to like slush cast this with latex, and that's basically where like you pour something into the mold and like move it around to make sure it coats like every angle and nook and cranny inside. I was finding that because latex kind of air dries as opposed to cure, it wasn't drying down here at the fingertips at all. So that's why I cut this one open, so that my thoughts are I'll still use the latex and just kind of paint into like all of these areas here on both sides. And then once they're fully dry, I can like do a little bit of latex at the seams to get them together. That way it kind of forms like a latex glove, I guess. So I'm gonna cut down the seam of the thumb and down here, and then like across the tips of the fingers. But I'm gonna try and cut it so that like, as you can kind of see with this one, most of the silicone is like making that cup shape, because that's gonna mean like a nice thick layer on the top side of the hand, which is going to get seen a lot.
And there we have it, 2 weird pink little silicone gloves ready for the latex.
Don't use a good paintbrush for this, guys, because the latex will just instantly destroy it. I'm using a paintbrush that was already previously destroyed with liquid latex, so it works fine. You can also get like silicone brushes, I think, or like a disposable makeup sponge, but I like trying to use things I don't have to throw away as often if I can, so this is gonna work for now.
I was going for a pretty thick layer of latex down just because it's boiling hot here in Australia at the moment, so this is going to dry pretty fast anyway. With all 4 of my pieces done, I'm going to take these ones outside to dry in the sun. And literally the only good thing about summer in Australia, everything dries super fast, so this took only a couple of hours. And you can see most of it has gone completely translucent, some of it's still got that sort of creamy yellow color, and it's time to rinse and repeat for a second layer. I think I ended up doing 3 layers on each piece. We're going to move on to the wig while the last layers dry out.
Okay, so this is the wig that I plan to use for Angeldust. This is one that I buy fairly often. I use it in a lot of my harpy headpieces, so it's the same base that I use for Juniper. I think it's designed to be a wig for Ursula, so hence why it's already got a lot of fluffy texture. All I've done to this so far is brush it. I was gonna do like a whole styling bit of this video, but I really don't think it needs much. Like, it kind of already has so much of that texture already. This lovely big fluffy fringy section is perfect for Angeldust fringe already.
So the only major change I did here was running a marker over some of the fibers of the hair to try and replicate those little pink splotches on Angeldust's head.
Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that actually. So I've got like a little pink section here and a little tiny bit of pink in the tips here. I've went a bit overboard over here, but that's okay. I think I'm happy with that. It just adds a little bit of that to kind of reference the little pink splotches on his head. So I'm gonna maybe do a little bit of hairspray just to try and point these bits, and then I'm gonna leave this alone. So with the latex still drying outside, there's only really one thing left on this whole cosplay to worry about, and that's the actual second set of arms that the hands are gonna attach to. Now, I'm not too worried about the arms being like hyper realistic. It's just really the hands that I really want to be like that level of detail. So I'm just gonna do an old-fashioned duct tape pattern.
A duct tape pattern is kind of a staple of the cosplay world. Essentially, you wrap a limb or part of your body in cling wrap and then wrap that in some sort of tape, usually duct tape as the name suggests. But fun story, a few years ago I went to buy some fragile tape to use on some of my boxes when I made the headpieces to send overseas, and I accidentally ordered like 10 times the quantity that I actually needed, and I have forever been trying to use up this annoying orange fragile tape. So anytime now that I need tape of any sort, I end up using this just to try and use it all up. Anyway, this is way easier if you have a friend to help you, but I'm a strong independent woman who don't need no friends apparently, so I'm just gonna do this all myself. If you are making your own duct tape pattern this way, please make sure you don't pull that tape too tight. You don't want to be cutting off circulation to your limb. When you go to cut this off, please make sure if you're doing this yourself to be so careful and go so very slowly and carefully. You're having some very sharp scissors right next to your skin. In fact, a lot of people will make sure that they're wearing long sleeves or fully clothed when they're doing a duct tape pattern just for the extra protection. Just take your time, move slowly and carefully, and we should be all good.
Well, that didn't take long at all, but like I could not cut this off my arm soon enough. It is like 34 degrees Celsius here in Melbourne today, so everything sucks and our air conditioning isn't great. But I have this looking great. What I'm probably going to do is cut out a little bit here. In fact, I could just do this right now. I don't know why I'm telling you about it instead of just doing it. So essentially I've got this shape, and the reason I've cut out where that V is so that the arm will be able to move a little bit like this, but still mostly hold the shape where it needs to hold its shape.
I got a big sheet of 3mm thick EVA foam here. This is Hard Light EVA foam from Lumen's Workshop. Quick shout out to these guys, they are amazing. I'm gonna press my duct tape pattern flat, and that's gonna give us the exact shape that I need to cut out of this foam. We're gonna trace this out. I definitely recommend white or silver gel pens when you're trying to mark on black EVA foam. And I'm gonna cut this out with a hobby knife. Make sure you're doing this over a cutting board. I have far too many scratches in my table for the times that I did not. Okay, this piece is looking pretty good. Now I'm going to cut out the other one. I'm going to blast these pieces with a heat gun for a few minutes just until they soften up that I can start to shape them with my hands back into the arm shape that the pattern held. Now that my foam pattern pieces are looking more like little arm tubes, it's time to close these up with some contact adhesive. Safety first, guys. If you're using contact adhesive, make sure you're wearing a respirator and doing it in a ventilated space. After a few minutes, letting the contact adhesive get nice and tacky, we're going to stick this together. I chucked some masking tape over the seams here as well just to hold it in place a bit longer. And I changed my mind about the elbow joint anyway, so I cut the two pieces apart and just sewed them back together just at that one section, just using some elastic. I'm hoping that it'll make the elbow joint more flexible so it can bend in more different ways.
So the one advantage of it being a gazillion degrees outside is all of the latex has dried super fast. So I have done 3 coats of latex on each of my little hand molds here. So that should be enough to form like a really good case once I like smush them together. I want to do something to like fill out the inside of it. Now initially I was thinking about using foam clay, right? But it's not going to have as much squish to it. So instead I'm thinking of like upholstery foam. For this I've literally just like traced my hand on the foam and cut it out. It's a bit too flat still, so I'm going to layer up 2 of these and then kind of like place them into the mold and then join the 2 together. And because latex sticks to latex, my thoughts are that I can just do like a tiny bit of liquid latex around the edge here, like where the molds go together, and then sandwich it on. And that way, that should basically like glue the latex together down the edges. I don't know if that's going to work. It might not. It might be terrible. But if it does, it'll essentially form that glove with the upholstery foam in the middle to like fill out the hand. And on top of this, I've got some armature wire, which I'm gonna run down each of the fingers. Yeah, we'll see how this goes.
I've got my trusty fabric glue that I'm just going to use to hold the wire in place before I sandwich the extra layer of foam on top. Okay, things started to get a little bit trickier from here out. First off, I need to push my little foam piece into my latex glove. Next, I painted the liquid latex along all of the edges so that the top piece of the glove can then stick down to it. This is about when I realized it wasn't quite going to plan. Pushing the 2 mold pieces together didn't really work super well to fuse the latex together. You might see along the edge I even tried sewing the mold back in place.
Yeah, this was the exact moment I started to think, I should have just bought hands. Why didn't I buy hands? What am I doing? In hindsight, this is a great example of the sunk cost fallacy.
But the latex wasn't fusing, and when it wasn't perfectly aligned. I ended up getting impatient and just pulling it out of the mold. And as you can see, it didn't entirely work. I think the latex wasn't quite thick enough on its own to hold its shape, so everything sort of pulled and warped as I pulled it out of the mold. And I got impatient and frustrated enough to pull the whole thing out, as I was hopeful I could still salvage this. I was cutting between each of the fingers to separate the latex. I was pulling on it from various points to try and get it like pulled over the foam base below it. Bits of the latex hadn't fully dried that I didn't even notice until I pulled it out. Dimples and lumps that were still going to show underneath the glove. In the end, I did try and sew some of the edges together as well, just because I just didn't trust the latex to stick to itself at this point. I did go back to the latex in the end because the stitching was kind of making that look like a Frankenstein hand. Yeah, this whole bit is just me just trying to brute force this weird amalgamation that I'd made into being a functional hand, which kind of half worked at least.
I'm fast losing daylight, but I think this might work. It looks terrifying. Once it's in a glove, it might work. It looks like I've literally just sewn someone's skin together. It's like a mummified kind of look to it. But what I've done is I've cut into here and here and removed the foam from that area too. So it's literally just hanging on here and there. But the reason I did that is so that this will move nice and easily around. So the wires work in the fingers. So the next thing is, before I start to build up the rest of the arm, I'm gonna try and shove this into the glove and just see if it looks convincing enough, basically. I don't know exactly how I'm gonna do this. I don't wanna cut into the glove. I really wanna just try and get it on in one go. This is gonna be hard. All right, I'm just gonna go finger by finger.
It took me about 15 minutes to get on this one glove, but hey, I got it on eventually.
Okay, it's not as neat as I was hoping. I feel like I could have done the same thing by spending $300 to buy an existing silicone hand. Ah, there it is. There's the line. Like, it's enough like a hand, and more to the point, like I can put elastic and things like that in here to make that move nicely. And if I wanted to pose this, let me give this a try. Like that. Look, it's not perfect, but I think this is about as good as it's gonna get. I have done the best I could. Now, before I try and get stuck into doing the second hand, I'm going to do the arm so that I can give this a little bit of structure. And that way, if I completely f up the arm, I haven't like gone all the way through doing both hands only to realize it doesn't work at all.
Compared to the chaos of making the hands themselves, this part was relatively smooth. Pulling up the glove so I could get to the wrist, I decided to get the latex part and basically pull it over the foam, kind of like a sleeve. And that alone was enough to join the two pieces together. So once you put the glove back down, this seemed to move pretty well and still allow for plenty of movement without looking like the wrist was just kind of empty. To fill out the elbow joint, I'm using some upholstery foam again, glued into a tube. I pulled this tube through so it's sitting directly between the upper arm and lower arm. For good measure, I'm gluing down the top of the glove over the EVA foam so it doesn't slip down and expose the inner parts. And hey, this looks pretty promising, honestly, guys. Like, you can kind of see that it looks like the shape of an arm. There's still a little bit of flexibility through the joint here. So far, everything's looking pretty promising. Starting on the second hand, I did put in some extra bits of foam just to sort of bulk it out where you'd otherwise have muscle definition. And the second hand looked a little bit less freaky and, well, actually no, it still looks terrifying. Who are we kidding? But you know what? It's more human shaped, I guess.
Okay, we're on the home stretch here, people. We are so close to being finished. I'm really happy with how these turned out. Like, one of them definitely came out a little bit smoother than the other in the hand area, but overall they move pretty nicely. I'm pretty happy with that. It's a bit of a shame that this line is so strong in here because the upholstery foam is here and the EVA foam is here. In hindsight, I could have like beveled the EVA foam down or even just used like something slightly thinner, but I'm not going to muck around with getting in there and trying to fix that. I don't mind it too much. What I'm going to do instead is use some trim that I got from Spotlight, which has that same holographic tint to it that a lot of these crystals do. And I'm just going to kind of glue that along the edge here because it'll kind of disguise it a little bit. One of my favorite policies is like, if you can't fix a mistake or hide a mistake, put something else over it to distract or make it look like it's on purpose. So, you know, there's a little insight for you. On this end here, I've put an extra little bit of upholstery foam glued in. This is so that when it's like attached at my side here, the upholstery foam will allow like a part where it can move nicely so that that's not really going to impact where everything's sitting. And then of course I'll need to cover up this end bit with a sleeve. And so for that, I actually managed to find this little bag here was $2. And this pink just happens to be pretty much exactly the same pink as the painted fabric I did, which is very useful because I really didn't feel like painting up any more fabric. So I'm going to salvage the cotton off this and just kind of make some sleeves that I'm going to attach onto this. Then I need to make just a little bit of a collar or cuff sort of thing for the top of the pink sleeves. I got some white cotton sateen for that. Easy stuff, I'll figure that out. And I bought some magnets, and the magnets are going to go in a couple of places on the hand and like under the collar and a couple of places on the jacket. And the reason is because it means that I can pose these hands in certain places and they'll just kind of like stay there. Like I could basically do this and have the magnet like here, and so that hand is just going to stay there while I'm doing other things with my other hand, so they're not always having to mirror my hands.
The pink sleeves were once again literally just a rectangle that I sewed into a tube of fabric, and you can tell that this was filmed directly after finally getting my tripod. That's why the angle is actually showing you what's going on instead of like directly at the desk. My camera work still leaves a lot to be desired, so I'll definitely be working on this one in coming videos. And this would be a very weird sentence out of context, but I got really excited once I saw that this actually kind of looked like a dismembered arm sitting on my desk.
Okay, just wanted to have a quick test run. I've just got my extra arm pinned to my hip right now, but want to test out that kind of position. Looks good. It moves pretty well. It obviously just kind of flops around in one position right now, but I'm hoping eventually I'll have a string like at the crook of my elbow and then hopefully one around the wrist so that I'll hopefully be able to bend it with a little bit more control, but even that's not too bad so far. So that's good. I'm gonna get this sewn on. I also wanted to check out where the position is for this one, because on his hot pink gloves, at the top of them they've got like this little cuff, and I've sewn this together just with that cotton sateen. I've just used like a semicircle, or I suppose semi-oval of fabric, and I can see exactly where I need to sew that on. So I need to sew that there and then around that, and that will kind of create the finished look.
So if you didn't quite catch that, basically I'm cheating and sewing the top of the glove cuff to the sleeve rather than the glove. That way it's still nice and easy to pull the glove on, and I can pull it all the way up so it sits underneath the cuff. At least that was the idea in theory. In practice, the gloves constantly slip down, so I might have to replace them or find a way to attach them to the sleeve once they're on, like Velcro or a press stud or something. But hey, modifications and repairs are future Charlotte's problem today. We're just getting this done. These are all the rhinestones that I've managed to shed off my costume while I've been sewing it together. So I've got some re-gluing to do, but I guess moral of the story is use better glues than I did. Okay, so here's where it's at. I've got these attached. I have just sewn them on here with a ton of reinforcing stitches. I haven't sewn like the whole thing as a tube onto here because I was finding if I did that, it kind of restricted the movement a little bit, and I do want this to be able to move like all the way around comfortably. I've got some string here, I've got some string at the wrist and some string over the, well, I seem to have lost the string that goes on the finger, but once I have those 3 points... And once again, my microphone ran out of battery and I did not notice. Again, I'm so sorry guys, it's a new camera and a new microphone, so it's a whole new setup for me and I'm just not used to checking for these things. So, to paraphrase myself here, everything else here is looking pretty good. I've got a white button in the center here that I've just glued a glittery pink heart to. This is purely for decoration and not really functioning. The actual fastening here is just Velcro on the inside. I've also got some magnets glued behind the bow tie, a couple of places on the collar, on both the hips, and in the palms and wrists on the extra arms. So I was hoping between the magnets and all of the string, there was a lot of different options for posing and positioning.
And with that, everything was kind of done. It was time to just put it all on for the first real test run of this hot mess of a cosplay.
I'm going for black and red lenses because I didn't have any hot pink on hand, and I'd recently run out of white face paint, so instead I used my palest concealer that I have. Seriously, this is not far off the color that I am in winter. Makeup for Angeldust was pretty simple, honestly. It was a hot pink eyeshadow, except I used the same thing everywhere. On my jawline, under my cheekbones, just as contouring in general. My eyebrows and eyeliner were all with the same liquid black eyeliner, sticking on a couple of rhinestones and some fake eyelashes, and we are ready to rumble, guys. Okay, I think my makeup is done. I'm pretty happy with that. It's time to put this on. Well, yes, I am using jewelry pliers to pull up my sleeves because I literally can't pick up or touch anything in these gloves. If you have a better suggestion to how to do this, I would love to hear it, honestly. All I've done is put this on and I am shedding so many crystals already. I don't ever want to have to deal with crystals again. Oh my god. And just when I thought my biggest problem was going to be the crystals, I constantly couldn't figure out where the magnets were in the palms or under the collar. I'm pretty sure they even shifted while I was filming. I swear it feels like every few seconds means I was adjusting the string or trying to find the magnets or losing more crystals. You can also see here that I ended up cutting into the wrist at the bottom a little bit because the glove seemed to be restricting the movement, but that ended up being more trouble than it was worth. There was just so much constant adjusting with this one. I definitely need to think of some better solutions if I ever want to take this to a convention.
I cannot begin to tell you guys how freaking annoying this cosplay is. I'm glad that I did this, but like, holy cow. This is like the most impractical thing I've ever made. It is so hot, and also like living in Australia. I have just absolutely littered the floor with gemstones right now. I had to, the string on the hand part on this one's broken, and the only way I could fix that is if I can get all of these gloves off, fix it, and then put all of it back on again. And obviously, like, my backdrop isn't really wide enough, so I'm actually incredibly frustrated and warm right now, but that's life. So here at the end of this project, despite all my frustrations, the more I was playing and moving the arms, the happier I was with it. And I think I've been kind of harsh on myself, expecting perfection when this was a throw together cosplay. I'm trying out different materials and techniques that I've never used before. And like, it might look a little bit clunky here and there, but it works. It functions. Sure, there's room for improvement, a lot, but I made this. That's freaking cool. This is not entirely the end of the road for this cosplay, of course. I plan to make some improvements based on some notes that I had. 1, just buy some damn hands. 2, make my own gloves or buy some better quality ones. 3, attach them better to the sleeves so they don't keep falling down and so they don't have to pull them up with pliers. 4, it saddens me to say this, but no bedazzling the gloves. They look so good, all sparkly. I think it really suits Angeldust's just general aesthetic, but it's just really not practical to have a bunch of crystals on your hand when you are constantly putting string on and off your fingers. It's just constantly going to rub them off. I might look into glitter or sequins instead. 5, jacket's got to be fully fitted at the waist. The arms kind of pull the jacket out because they sit like under the ribs a little bit. They kind of give you a reverse hourglass. I've got a thick waist as it is. I need all the help I can get to try and replicate Angeldust's wiry spider figure. 6, better attachment for the strings. 7, bigger magnets. And I've already got some in the mail, these absolute big monstrosities here. So if these are in the jackets and the palms of the hand, those arms are not going anywhere unless I want them to. I don't know when I'll get around to implementing all the above. So for now, I think this one's done. I'm going to hand this back to Path Me to finish this off. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed seeing this come together. Like, obviously there's still a lot to improve on for movement and all that sort of thing. I really hope that some of you guys try and make some arms of your own and, like, you know, can tell me where you found ways to improve or completely different methods to use. I think that cosplay is one of those things that can kind of be a bit of a collective experience because you'll see one person try a technique and you build off that and you improve here, and that's how we all just get better at making these ridiculous things. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. I want to say an extra special thank you for my patrons. Without my Patreon supporters, I literally could not make weird stuff like this. Extra special thank you to my top tier patrons, my ultimate supporters: Artemis, Dakota, Rakishan, Residual Images, Tamara, Tim, and Yuri. You guys are absolutely amazing. Oh my god, I could post, but no, I'm not going to try and post the bottom ones into a heart. I'm sorry. But thank you guys so much. And thank you to all of my other amazing supporters on Patreon. Some of their names are appearing on screen now. If you would like to join us over on Patreon, I post things like previews, work in progress, occasionally completely exclusive tutorials or montages on how I make things over there. I will put the link in the description below. I'm also not going to try and point these, but you guys can just imagine I did that. Tell me in the comments, who's your favorite Hazbin Hotel character and why? Or Hell of a Boss character? Is there another character you would like to see me cosplay? Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!